Hello, everyone, and it is a pleasure to once again say welcome to the Discourse for the week of March 22nd, 2021. The Discourse is our weekly news show here at the NYU Game Center, the game design department at New York University. Each week, Professors Frank Lance and Naomi Clark talk about game industry news and give us their scorching hot takes. Take it away, Frank and Naomi.
Thanks, Logan. Hey, Naomi.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Frank. It's nice to be back.
It's great to be back. Hey, chat. How's it going?
Yeah, and had a long winter.
Yeah, did you miss us? Maybe a little bit. I missed us. What did you do during this time, Naomi? Just kick back and relax, just do nothing for a solid 3 months?
I showed you the other day what I was doing. I've just been building giant automated arenas in Terraria to farm rare items. That's the only thing that satisfies the giant game-shaped hole inside of me this deep into a shutdown year.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the pandemic and what we've all been doing, let's take a look at our first link. This is something that Alexander King shared with us. This was on the front page of the New York Times.
Yeah, nothing makes me feel like things are returning to normal. Like video games once again taking our place as the whipping dog of parental scorn and just like disapproval, right? Like this is what kids should not be doing. Video games, like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that the shutdown has stretched on. It's actually now we've gone full circle back to being a problem again. From the articles that were coming out, we were talking about so many articles last year that were like, oh, video games are actually really great to play when you're stuck back at home during a pandemic. Now it's like, okay, that's enough. Enough is enough. Video games.
Yeah. So it's always nice to see the New York Times weighing in on a matter of cultural importance and giving us their snooty take.
Their scorching cold take of like video games. Maybe you shouldn't be playing so much.
I don't think it's too early to start taking a little look back. I feel like this is almost the first opportunity to say maybe we're slowly emerging from this cozy hole that we've all sunk into over the past year, where we've been fully wired up to all of our devices to keep us kind of sane during this really stressful time. And this is like maybe the first glimpse of the cocoon cracking, and we're about to emerge back into the real world. So I welcome this.
It's much better than people trying to praise games as the savior of pandemic society.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think that's not something we're ready for. Yeah, back to normal. Back to our place down at the bottom of the table.
So let's take a look at the next one.
Let's keep going.
Something Eric was sharing with us, which is there were a bunch of articles about hipster jigsaw puzzles as being the go-to entertainment during the pandemic. Naomi, did you play a hipster jigsaw puzzle during the quarantine?
I did help with a jigsaw puzzle. I don't know if I could recognize whether it was a hipster one. It was one when my mother-in-law was working on a puzzle. I think it did not have quite the color palette. Now that this article calls out the color palette of hipster puzzles as being particularly important. It's not so much about difficulty tuning anymore as it is about how it aesthetically fits into the rest of your lifestyle products, and has a nice box, which I think sort of follows board game box conventions, right? It's like you can put it on your shelf and it looks like a nice conversation piece, I guess. But not all board games work that way, but I certainly think about that when designing a board game box.
Yeah. I think a hipster jigsaw puzzle is one that incorporates a little bit more design thinking, opening up the possibilities for the kinds of things you can do with the jigsaw puzzle. Some of them are more like escape rooms. They have kind of mysteries or narratives that you're participating in. Max Temkin started a new company doing hipster jigsaw puzzles called the Magic Puzzle Company, which really kind of have some innovative mechanics in the jigsaw part as well.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. That's interesting that it's also sort of spreading out in that direction. Because looking at these photos, it's a little bit like, this is your local artisanal handcrafted jigsaw puzzle that goes with your new mugs that are like mason jar mugs. You get like mason jar mug, and you need a hipster jigsaw puzzle too,
and a deer head mounted on your wall.
Right, exactly. And while you're listening to Deerhead, a local band. Yeah,
they're exactly. But they are there are actually some genuinely cool little game design innovations that are happening in this space. And I'm a big fan of forms of games that are denigrated, considered kind of uncool or low status. Jigsaw puzzles are kind of ripe for this type of reinvention. Right. So I'm kind of excited to see this happen. And I love jigsaw puzzles. I'll tell you what we have discovered that's really fun is speed running jigsaw puzzles. So if you want a good time, forget all of these fancy new mechanically innovative versions.
Just try to do it really fast.
1,000-piece hard puzzle and set a clock and see if you can do it in less than 2 hours.
Right. So none of this like come back to it occasionally and leave it on your dining room table for a long time jigsaw puzzle nonsense.
Flip it around. Instead of being this boring thing that's meant to be percolating in the background, you treat it as this really intense thing. It opens it up and makes it into a really genuinely fun and different kind of experience.
You could take bets on like, over and under like certain amount of time, get really...
Well, I'm not a betting person. I mean, as you know, I don't like to...
Yeah, I know you hate gambling. Yeah.
No, I mean, and money is sacred and I feel like it should be treated with respect, slinging around with bets and stuff. So not for me, but other people are certainly welcome to do that.
Right, gotcha.
All right. So
Keep
the
going.
other thing that happened during the pandemic was COVID-19. And it's apparently there was, this is, this is just a segue. I don't care about this. There's some football team that did really good at preventing their players.
Yeah, this is my hometown football team, the Seahawks. This is the football team I did not watch growing up because I didn't watch football. But if I did, I would have watched the Seahawks.
Well, congratulations, because apparently they were very good at not getting COVID. They did some common sense things. I read this article. It was, but the point is that it's mostly a transition into sports talk. So I think
let's see.
Go Seahawks.
Go Seahawks. Good job. Seattle, very polite place.
But here's some more. So here's some more. I think discoursey sports topics for us. The first one is from Tony Pizza, who talks about how the NFL is considering some big rules change, which is spot and choose instead of a coin flip, to determine who starts with possession during overtime. So apparently the way this works is spot and choose is like a cut and choose in the famous game theory little Gedankenspiel of how you divide a cake fairly. So everyone knows
it's a cake cutting problem. Yep.
Yeah, the cake cutting problem. I cut, you choose. So the rule that's being proposed is that instead of in overtime, we flip a coin and whoever calls it gets possession of the ball. One team gets to choose a starting spot on the field,
Ravens.
And the other team gets to say, yes, we want to take possession at that location, or no, you can take possession at that location, which is just great, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense. And interestingly, this was suggested by just a thought experiment on somebody else's blog who was like, why do they keep doing this coin toss? It's obviously giving an advantage to just a random side. So how about this instead? And it's just based on the cake cutting problem. I'm really curious as to whether there is just like an equilibrium point for this, right? Because for a cake cutting problem, there is. It's like whatever is exactly 50% of the way across the cake. For two people, at least it's easy, right? But is there like a perfect point for a football match? And it probably depends on the team, right? Like what your strategy is, where you want to start, and then but then on the other side, there's probably a response, right? Like, and I think this article goes into some detail about like, well, probably this would be gamed out a little bit in advance by the coaches who would say, okay, if the starting spot is behind this line, then we'll choose this way, and if it's in front of this line, then we'll choose the other way.
Yeah, and yes, it's Tony Pizza, but it's with an I. Tin Kelp, Tony with an I.
Oh yeah, and there's Tony right now in chat.
Very one of the main sources of sports news for the discourse.
Exactly. Yes.
The thing I love about this this proposed rule, which probably won't be adopted, it's very unlikely, but it could be. If they're considering it, it might be. But I just love in rules in game design that have this kind of clever. I think of this as a Euro style rule. You know what I mean?
It's very equitable. It's not about chaos or like unpredictability. It's like, let's get things even and nice. Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm working on a game design problem, I like to think, what would Rainer Knizia do? And this strikes me as the kind of thing that Rainer Knizia would do. It's like a little too clever, but it puts some just-in-time balancing into the mix. So
it is a very Rainer Knizia type thing. Also, the other answer is he would get ripped off by Dave Serlin. Oh, I'm sorry, Dave. I'm sorry.
Speaking of ripping a big one off. Do you know about the Bong Cloud opening in chess, Naomi?
Oh, this is great. This is so classic, and this is something that I think Dave Serlin would really appreciate. Unlike my crack at his expense, just the weird kind of this particular type of sportsmanship that's inherent in doing this opening, which is just, it's called the Bong Cloud opening because you would have to be high to do this opening, right? It's just really bad. It's like a taunt. No, it's the equivalent of a taunt from a fighting game, right? But in chess, where it's like, I'm gonna do this stupid thing. Can you believe it? And the great thing about this match between Magnus Carlsen and Nakamura is like that they just start cracking up, because Nakamura is kind of known for doing this Bong Cloud opening as like as a fuck you, basically, right? Yeah. Like, I'm going to do this stupid opening and still beat you. And then Carlsen does it to him and he just laughs. And so it's actually sort of a nice moment of like, are we really doing this? Yeah, we're really doing the stupid game.
This is a legitimate tournament, right?
Yeah.
And these are arguably the two best chess players on the planet. Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, Nakamura, also very, very highly rated, very strong contender for being amongst the best players on the planet. This is a real tournament, a real game, and they are memeing hard. Like, it is weird and interesting, maybe disturbing, maybe awesome, that chess at its highest level, when it's played in the most serious way, has room in it, or if you look at it a different way, isn't safe from memes, right? So they're playing online.
It's
online
definitely
tournament.
A chess meme.
They're memeing. So to begin with, it's really interesting that this very, the epitome of intellectual, cerebral games has room in it, even when it's being played seriously by the top players, for this weird kind of cultural thing of non-seriousness.
What I love about this is it puts to test the idea that there's just one kind of true competitor attitude, right? That you have to be like utterly serious, only play to win, only maximize your EV or your chances of winning at all costs, right? No, instead you can do this weird thing that has this cultural level of meaning, and that's about the social relationship between you and your opponent, the other like best chess player in the world, right? So why not? It's wonderful. This
is really turning into a David Serlin episode.
It really is. This is like, that's totally also against David Serlin's philosophy of like, it's all about winning at all costs. Yeah.
David Serlin.
No, it's about the Bong Cloud, Dave.
David Serlin, to his credit, in his book Playing to Win, does address the times when you don't play to win. Like he acknowledges that there are plenty of times when it's appropriate not to play to win. And I think he would probably give the nod to this one. He's a huge stoner. I mean, the guy is completely, utterly baked 24/7.
Oh, now we have to go and see what his opinion is of the double Bong Cloud. Now I have to ask him.
The other things we should mention quickly, and I see Andy Nealon's in the chat here. He's going to hold my feet to the fire if I don't get this correct. So the Bong Cloud is actually, it's not just named because it's a goofy opening. It's named after a guy named Bong Cloud who developed it. So there was his screen name.
What's he named after?
He's a member of some rather serious kind of online chess strategy community, and he's the person who did the research, explored this line and defended it. So so it's named after him. I forget what his name is. Someone in the chat maybe knows, Lenny Bongcloud or something, but his screen name is Bongcloud. So that's what it's technically named after, although it does evoke the idea that it's a goofy opening. And in addition, I would say the seriously interesting thing about this is that it shines a light on a domain of game design that I think is really fascinating, which is meta game design. Tournaments, ladders, MMR, ELO. The reason that this opening happened, it's not just that memes are unstoppable. It's that the tournament structure that they were playing within really incentivizes draws until you get to the final eight.
Yeah, okay,
so
great.
If you're already seeded in a way, or you're already going to make it to the final eight, then it's beneficial to both players in many cases to give and receive a draw. And this double Bongcloud was also just an offer and an acceptance of a draw. So
right.
And Nakamura, when discussing it, because some people are salty about this, and obviously draws in chess are one of the biggest design challenges of chess, the fact that it's too drawy, and how can we deal with that, right? So, but Nakamura made a really interesting comment when he was talking about this in the follow-up. And he said, when you prepare for a chess tournament, you bring ideas, and ideas are a limited resource. They're things that you develop with your computer models and your coaches and your strategy team. There are new variations on existing lines, and once you use them, they are used up. So introducing an idea in a tournament uses it up because you're showing it to.
Well, now other people can use it too, right?
Yeah. And so you are holding your ideas as a limited resource and trying to keep them until the final eight where things really matter. And it's just interesting that chess, which seems to be a game of perfect information, that doesn't have anything like a limited resource in it, actually, when you play it, does have this limited resource. And that kind of it just makes chess more complicated and interesting. And I just think this idea of how should we be designing tournaments is really something that's kind of underexplored.
Yeah, it's great, right? Because the tournament is not all about every time it needs to produce a strong match with no draws. It's about sometimes there's these weird openings for other sorts of things to happen, and it actually allows a more interesting environment to flourish. Alexander King is making a great point in chat that the Bongcloud, this double Bongcloud opening, originated because Lenny Bongcloud was playing his own variant of chess on top of other chess games, right? He invented his own game to try and do within chess, where he would try to get his king to the opponent's back row, which is just extreme, right? That's I don't know, a pacifist run of chess or something more difficult than that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that he was kind of giving himself this extra game that he was playing inside of chess. And
I'm gonna have to use this as an example because I talk about this when we're talking about illusory attitude in game design classes, right? That you could be playing a completely different game in your mind than your opponent, even if you're actually formally playing the same exact game as each other. So Bongcloud is playing his own game, and because it just points out games sort of taking place in your brain, and you could be. All right, let's keep going.
Okay. Speaking of esports and mind sports. Eric pointed out that there are a couple of new gaming chairs in the mix. One of them from Herman Miller, one of them from IKEA. Chair design, obviously one of the kind of emblematic fields of design. If you are a cool design person,
and aficionados might be able to tell I am also I'm in a much cheaper Herman Miller chair right now.
Yeah. I'm in some kind of this is like a shaker, so the Herman, these are both ugly. I mean, the thing about gaming chairs is there's never been a good looking gaming chair. They're
right.
uniformly terrible looking. In
so
my
you would
opinion.
think Herman Miller would be able to make one I don't know. This just looks like another chair to me. I'm not really probably enough of a chair aficionado.
It looks like a kind of generic, ergonomic, over designed. Industrial alien nightmare, right? It looks a little.
How much is it, Logan? What's the price tag on this thing? Is it $14.95? Yeah, so $1,500.
Cool, $1,500.
Right. And I was thinking, so what makes this a gaming chair? There's two features. One is that it has more support for you sitting up straight rather than leaning back and relaxing, which, because apparently that's more likely. I don't know if that's based on any kind of data, but like you're more likely to be like getting excited and leaning forward, at least for some games, right? I don't play games like that.
Yeah, there's a Mountain Dew cup holder in the arm, and there's
Herman Miller Mountain Dew partnership.
Carbon fiber fart filter in the seat.
Apparently it does stay cooler. This chair apparently stays cooler because they're anticipating that gamers are run hotter than other people.
Right, and you can use that to mine Bitcoin or whatever you want. That's really up to you. Okay, so speaking of IKEA. Jeff Engelstein,
they also have this one. This is good.
IKEA now has cardboard versions of the upcoming game. Are these still upcoming, or did they come out?
No, they came out. This is from a while ago. They did.
This is an old news story,
right?
But it was a great segue. You have to admit that.
That was a great way. So speaking of IKEA, you can go to IKEA and see these fake consoles to be like, holy shit, that console is big.
It's pretty big. And also that brings us into kind of our next set of related topics, which is platform studies. So welcome to we've had sports talk.
Right.
Now let's get back into so
my favorite kind of article, an article about how bad Amazon is at making games. This is another excellent deep dive from Bloomberg into like all the ways that Amazon screwed up. I feel like that a case study of how poorly Amazon ran its game studios should be required reading for anyone who wants to run a game business. Because it's just like everything they did was wrong, and they made all the mistakes, including like panicking over trends, like bringing in like the idea of the month to try and right the ship. I don't like expecting to be able to hire creative people and then induct them in the company mantras of like efficiency, productivity. I don't know. So I don't know. I have not read any of the exposés about Amazon's corporate culture, but it sounds like one of the last places in the world I would want to work as far as large companies go, maybe with the exception of anywhere within the finance industry. But I feel bad for the people who sunk a lot of time and effort and creativity into trying to make games at Amazon, and it didn't work out. I feel bad for them. But there's also something, and it's not Schadenfreude, but there is a little bit of pleasure, I feel, from the idea that games remain unwieldy, untamable, that there is something about games that make them elusive to the techniques that a place like Amazon has for wrangling the production process on certain kinds of creation and distribution problems, and games just don't fit into that because in a way, games are not just something we do when we're not working. In a way, games are anti-work, right? And this is what makes them have such an ongoing kind of problematic relationship to gamification and people's attempts to sort of apply games to solving real-world problems, is that there is something special about the status of games that makes them go orthogonally to the parts of our lives where we are in pursuit of a well-defined goal, applying all of our intelligence to achieve it. And they usurp work, which I think is a wonderful, they're usurpers of work. And that's our role, and they provide all sorts of work that is not productive, which is to say beautiful.
But Amazon, in addition to not being able to produce games on their own, is attempting to apply games in this other way, as this other article makes clear.
Right. So this is about something that I guess would not be surprising anywhere, but like somehow it is a little surprising that they're expanding this program at Amazon. Like, so somebody has made games that you can make your employees play. I guess this stuff is designed specifically for Amazon. Amazon is large enough, has enough people working there that somebody's designed games specifically for Amazon. I don't get. I get the impression that these were designed by somebody else outside Amazon. Like, although I know there's a good joke from Alexander King that like, oh, so Amazon did figure out how to design games after all. These are just for workers to play, where you every time you go and pick a product and pack it, or finish a package to get shipped off to some customer somewhere, you get to like enter it in, and you get one experience point, and then you get to spend your experience points on a virtual character or pet
like
or something.
Pets, like virtual pets.
It's on all the typical things you can imagine from a gamification scheme. There's different themes depending on what you want to play. It's just it's a terrible use of people's time. Probably that's what struck me, right? Like the hours at fulfillment centers are crushing already. People are not allowed to take bathroom breaks, but they are apparently allowed to take breaks to enter their score into a system where they feed their virtual Amazon pet. Yeah.
In a way, I think the most soul crushing part of this is not so much that it is manipulating workers, but that it is betraying this strange lack of sensitivity to the grossness of this, right? Like when you the fact that you don't look at applying this kind of infantile game-like structure to someone's job, and that doesn't kind of turn your stomach. It's like you're somehow missing something about the way these things are meant to work in our lives, the way that we want to get meaning from our jobs. You know what I mean? The way we want our jobs to reflect something about who we are and our capacity to participate in shared projects and to earn a living and to have a career. The idea that and the way that games fit into our lives, right? The way that games operate as a thing that's voluntary, as a way for us to kind of express our own identity and explore, you know what I mean? Like the way culture works. The idea that, let's just slather, one of these onto the other one and stick them together. It's
what I find offensive. What I find offensive is that, is that these are bad games. Like you can just read about them, and they are barely a game at all. And they're just an incentive system that I don't think, I don't know, it's insulting to people who work at Amazon to be like, well, you need this to give a shit about your job at all. Virtual pet food, right? Like, here, please do this. Like, as if they don't know that they can get a game just like this to play on their own recognizance without it being connected to their job. Yeah. They all know that. Like, people who work at Amazon are not stupid. They have phones, and so, but here's the thing. So Chad is saying, somebody said something I thought that was really, really smart. Draco Mora said it's a new horrible evolution of sea shanties, which is to say, something that you do as a group in order to actually make difficult, laborious work go by more quickly and feel like you're doing something together. You're being creative. You're expressing yourself. So imagine, what if we lived in a world where, one, people could do meaningful work and receive fair remuneration, and maybe have a union if necessary to negotiate with management, right? But then also, what if there was an activity you could do that was meaningful with people you were working with, because there was work that you had to get done, and something that would make it actually, I don't know, more pleasurable somehow. It's not impossible that there's a good version of gamification out there in some possible universe. That's what I'm saying. Well, if sea shanties exist, sea shanties exist, work songs, the relationship of work songs and to the American to jazz and soul music and blues and R&B, that's a deep, fascinating, complicated story, and maybe there's something similar like that. I bet you there are probably folk versions of activities that people do together while working. Mm-hmm. which are not, not just songs, but also things that have some sort of ongoing state that's contributed to by multiple people, right?
Yep.
Like that wouldn't be shocking. So yeah, collaborative forms of play to enhance work.
Also, Victor in chat is suggesting that maybe game designers should have their own Hippocratic oath. And a lot of people, I think, were agreeing with him. I would like to suggest one. Here's my version of what the game designer Hippocratic oath would be. First, do no harm. Then do a little harm.
do a certain kind of harm.
A little harm. Okay,
yeah,
so
it's not a game if it doesn't have a little bit of that. That's stupid. Yeah.
Okay, so what other giant, mega successful corporations are having difficulty making games? What comes to mind? We talked about Amazon. What's the next one?
It's time for Stadia. All right, so long, Google Stadia.
Welcome to the Stadia corner. So Google Stadia has shut down its internal studios completely.
Yeah, so yet another titan tries to take on games and fails. Yep. Although now, wait, I just heard about something recently that there are a bunch of Game Center alumni involved in. Our good friends over at Playcrafting have been running a game jam to try and get Stadia back up and breathe some new life into Stadia.
Okay, good. Let's see what happens. Maybe they'll make. What if they just made Stadia open source? How about that?
What if they just made some good games and it didn't really matter whether they were for Stadia? That's what I hope that they're doing over at that game jam.
Yeah. Me too. Anyway, moment of silence for Stadia. We will continue to cover Stadia on a weekly basis, even though it doesn't exist. So
be like Stadia Death Watch.
We're not going to talk about Stadia every week. We'll talk about Stadia.
But for real, how come Stadia ran a game jam, getting a whole bunch of people to make games probably for a pittance, I have to assume, right after laying off all of their internal developers?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It's an interesting shift in strategy. How far back do you think that was planned? We were like, okay, we got to shut down all the studios, but we have to keep things going somehow. Why don't we run a game jam? Yeah.
So there are big mega corporations trying to make games and failing, and then there's Flash, which was made by owned by a big corporation, and they attempted to safely sunset it. They attempted to put Flash away, but recently there was an incident in which an entire railroad in China was shut down for 16 hours because Flash was a little app running on a little Flash app was like integral to this entire operation.
It was displaying the timetables. It was like doing what one of the basic things that Flash was perfectly good at was just displaying a little interactive timetable. On a web page. I don't know. I'm more. This reignited my irritation with Adobe. I understand that Flash was riddled with security holes and that sometimes it's easier just to be like, we can't deal with this anymore. We can't fix this. It's just like a spaghetti pile of problems. But I don't know. I think there's some sort of level of obligation that Adobe owes its success to the existence of this thing, among other products, right? But Flash is a huge part of Adobe for many years. And I don't know. I think maybe they had an obligation to keep it running and to fix it.
I agree, and I think we could share the blame. I think Apple has some.
Yeah, it's true. Apple's a big part of it
as well, because Apple was the one to really put the boot in. I think if Apple hadn't been so virulently anti-Flash, Adobe might have continued to support it. So.
Yeah, and there are all sorts of things that we want corporations to take more seriously, right? How they treat workers and the environment, all sorts of things, right? But somewhere down there on that list, there's also the stewardship of our shared digital culture and tools and platforms, right? And you'd think that they would be more invested in this than they are, but no, it's actually on a strict profit basis of like engineer hours versus what profits are going to be able to reap from this business area. It often makes sense for Apple or for Adobe or whoever to be like, you know what, let's just push this out so something new can happen. And it's not a steward's attitude, right? It's not the attitude of yeah, the necessary stewardship of an ecosystem, of a digital ecosystem, and nobody is thinking about that, right? Nobody in government is thinking about that. Nobody in the tech sector is thinking about that. So it's a bummer.
In order to get this railroad up and running again, they had to find a pirated version of Flash that worked. And in doing some, following some threads from that, Chris Wallace discovered this awesome article about an old Chinese bootleg game console called the Little Hegemon, which I thought was just a great name for a console. It's now my favorite game console, the Little Hegemon. Now I assume the little Hegemon is probably just a phrase that people use for. Have you ever encountered this phrase before?
Little Hegemon. I don't know why it's Little Hegemon. That is the translation of the name of the console. It might be something phonetic about what the name sounds like in Chinese.
Yeah. I just assumed
it's a cute name.
Little King, Little Prince, like just like a cute little bossy character.
Yeah, it's Xiao Ba Wang, and so Wang is king, right? But I don't know what the Ba. Okay, it's a figure in Chinese history. All right, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a great looking console. Love pirate consoles. And then you were mentioning this other Twitter thread on.
Yeah, I wanted to take a look at that.
Yeah.
So this really struck me. There are a couple things going on here. This is Cici Zhang, the designer behind Lion Killer, pointing out that Rock Paper Shotgun published a review of a game called Kitaria Fables and called it a Stardew-like, right? So sort of coining a new genre term like roguelike, a Stardew-like, right? And another developer, Aura here, said, wait a second, what about Rune Factory? What about, presumably also, what about Harvest Moon, right? And so it struck me this is the equivalent of white entrepreneurs opening Asian restaurants. Right? Right. So Stardew Valley, perfectly lovely game, right? But the concerned ape knows what a huge debt he owes. He's like a very deliberate homage to a whole giant Japanese genre of farming games. And but now his success in the West has sort of made Stardew the poster child for that genre. Mm-hmm. And so I think this to me is a sign of something that's been going on for several years now. And if you scroll down in this thread, Logan, there's another interesting note from the head of a publishing company. Keep going down, go down, keep going. Oh wait, now you have to get a few more replies. But there's one reply that from keep going. There we go, Ian. Yeah, right. Go back up. Sorry. Yeah, this guy, Ian Garner. He is the head of a publisher that specializes in indie games from Asia, from the Philippines, from China, from Indonesia. And he's pointing out, look, a lot of our games are pretty successful on Steam, but there's zero coverage of them in the Western press, right? So they can't get a Metacritic score. Nobody's covering these games. Yeah, and we're talking about games that are in English, right? That are being translated. So I don't know. We could blame this on there's just not enough coverage for everybody. But also, we're seeing the emergence, I think, of a new type of provincialism where it's oh no, we can really only cover, we only include this type of game within our sphere of indie games that we coverage, or within that we cover, or within games at all. And it has serious systemic effects on some developers, right? Especially including Asian American developers who is as Cici Zhang is pointing out in this thread, are at risk of just being pigeonholed as oh, well, you're making an Asian game, right? And so it's in this other category. And I think this is horribly relevant right now, especially with the outbreak of violence in Atlanta at the end of last week, and the rash in hate crimes against Asian Americans. Of course, this is at a very other end of bias and discrimination against Asians, but it's very real within the game industry that Asian stuff is over here. And then oh, so Western stuff is over here. What's that divide about, and who does it hurt, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it demonstrates a real provincialism, a real parochialism, most indie developers, especially many indie developers, really have blinders on about what the industry looks like overall. They don't have a good sense of where audiences are and how diverse this community is. They really just kind of like look at their own stuff. And I've always felt this way about people. I've had this argument with Clint Hawking, for example. Clint Hawking, who talks a lot about when will games deal with emotions and relationships and issues like honor. And I'm like, well, wait, are you not aware of like visual novels? There are millions and millions of people playing games that are just all about relationships and emotions and connections. And you're just not interested in that because that's just not on your radar. You look at that and you think it's, it's for other people. It's for someone else. It's for like,
it's for aliens from another place, right? From another universe.
Like, no, this is we're being bought and sold on Steam. We're all part of the same planet. And it's like jigsaw puzzles in a way. There are just certain kinds of games that are just low status. They're not considered important.
Right.
People don't pay attention to them. And it's a parochialism.
And when that lines up with international and ethnic categories, I think it's extra disturbing. And God forbid that you're not from East Asia or from, America, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, right? Like if you're a developer in like Pakistan or South America or Africa, or Southeast Asia, also, just incredibly difficult to break through this wall of like, well, we're really looking at people that we know and the companies that we're familiar with working in those.
So speaking of farming games, Farmville has now been officially shut down. So at the end of last year, on December 31st, let's pour one out for Farmville.
Was that because it was in Flash? I guess it must have been because of something to do with Flash.
I don't think so. Maybe it's possible. Maybe you're right. It's
the original Farmville, right? Well, because Farmville 2 still exists. I'm gonna bet. Yeah.
But the point of this article was that Farmville's gone, but in a way, all games are Farmville now.
Right, or all social media platforms are Farmville. Like it's the social media platforms that were really like. I think that's what's pointed out in this article. Ian Bogost is. I kind of agree what he's saying in this article that like it infected everything, and like this spirit of gamification, the spirit of like cyclical re-engagement, like rewarding addiction cycles and like all of this kind of stuff, and tracking scores and things like that. That's really the lesson that all of the platforms took away from the success of Farmville. Not to like make games, not to make anything with any kind of, play experience or story or content or game mechanics or anything. Just like, let's distill only the skeletal functional thing that like hooks into people's brains. Let's rip that out and like make platforms based on it. Yeah.
But there are other ways of making money, getting money to make games. This next piece is we wanted to give a quick shout out to the Moonrise Fund, which is an interesting looking new game funding initiative that's creator based. So if you don't know about this, this is a fund that is handing out investment for game projects, and they really want to look at the team. They want to look at the creator more than just look at the game. They want to invest in people. We think that's a great idea. So we want
it's about time. So definitely, if it's not on your radar, it should be.
And then Clara mentioned also a positive story about a successful IPO from a female-owned Japanese company that is making games for women. So
and this is right in the category you're talking about. These are otome games. They're mobile games. They're story-driven, right? Like some of them are visual novels, among other types of games. Otome, meaning maiden in Japanese. It's this. Yeah, the most popular over time. That's one of the most popular genres among women in Japan, and also a lot of people in the West. But kind of like largely unknown and off the radar of people who think seriously about games over here, right? But a huge genre.
Yes, and by the way, I'm sure deeply problematic in its own way. Like,
of course.
No doubt. No doubt.
They also do some harm. There's a little bit of harm.
They do a little bit of harm, which is what we want.
Frequently to depictions of gay men. Yeah, so
but this
for
is
sure.
But this is a company led by two women making games that are primarily for women, and we wanted to give them a quick shout out. Also from Mitu, we had an interesting article about where this is a video, I think, an investigative video on YouTube about the poor working conditions in outsourced art studios, which are primarily in Southeast Asia. So these are ways in which big companies can sort of outsource crunch. So these big game studios are more and more, a huge percentage of the work they're doing are through these third-party vendors, especially when it comes to visual art and animation. And many of them have terrible working conditions. So it's kind of a shadow way of having really bad working conditions.
And this is so common. Like, even if you are a mid-sized studio, I mean, tell me if you think that I'm off base on this, Frank, but if you're a mid-sized studio or a small like studio getting started up, and you go and you ask for some advice, like, okay, how should we deal with like a huge amount of work? How do we like make a profitable game? One of the first things that like the conventional wisdom will deliver back is you should really outsource your art to like very low cost like labor, in other parts of the world. Just have all of your art done there, right? Like don't hire artists who you have to actually pay or
I don't think it's that cut and dry. I don't think people are recommending to other people, hey, don't hire an artist.
Right.
But I do think there are
certain types of artists, right?
And by the way, I think this is a good thing. I think it's great for people to be making games in a large scale collaboration that spans the globe. I think it's great that people in other parts of the world have an opportunity to work on these things. I just think that we need to take responsibility for the working conditions of everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's going to be massively inequitable if you just sit back and don't do anything about it. Yeah. Just because of the economic disparities involved, right?
And that means making some hard choices and making having difficult conversations. But we can't just like sweep it under the carpet and say that this isn't our problem. It's something that we all need to take responsibility for and be honest about.
Right, and this is incredibly common across a lot of industries, right? The garment industry all operates on this principle too. Like, if people starting their own small business, doing their own line of handbags or something, tote bags even, like, find this out right away. It's like, oh, you pay a very, very small amount of money, relatively speaking, to people in India or somewhere in order to like actually get these things made. It cuts across a lot of industries, and I think it really does just come down to what you're saying, that you have to like treat people like human beings, and actually not look for shortcuts to not treat people fairly and humanely.
The game industry is thriving. The game industry is growing. Let's make sure that the game industry is a engine of opportunity for everyone who's working in it, and a way for everyone to improve their living conditions, improve their working conditions, share in the benefits of making something that the entire world wants.
Right. And not just create a new Foxconn either, where people are throwing themselves off the roof.
So now that we've wandered into the economics, the econ talk portion of the discourse, I think it's time to quickly touch on game stonks, right? Everyone knows.
Yeah, that happened while we were away. Yeah.
I don't know what to say about this, except it happened. It's the most discourse-y thing you can imagine in terms of being an example of systems thinking in the world, kind of upending conventions, causing it's like emerging out of game culture. I think it's not a coincidence that the target for this maneuver was a game-related company. Right. It just kind of fits in with the slightly kind of trolly and gamey kind of.
Yeah, it like makes it more hilarious, which is what sort of fuels the meme frenzy.
Everyone knows what happened with Game Stonks. It's like this Reddit community which was able to, in a way, introduce a new kind of maneuver in investing, right? That this kind of short squeeze is a thing that already existed, but the from my understanding of this, the real innovation here is the way that the Reddit community was able to solve the coordination problem that a large-scale short squeeze has. Like, so when you're participating in this maneuver, every individual who's participating is incentivized to get out first. And that's what makes this kind of maneuver hard to pull off. So somehow within this kind of Reddit community, as a combination of the actual just technology of how Reddit works as a communications platform, but also of the culture and the norms of how we think about each other and our responsibilities to each other, they were kind of able to to do something new, which enabled them to manipulate the market in this surprising way. And it's been framed as a story of plucky, underdogs, like standing up to the man and kind of.
Yeah, that was the part that was the most tragic to me, is because part of the way they generated enthusiasm was spitting out as this ideological story, right? Like, we've got to punish these evil hedge funds who are like shorting and ruining companies. When really, who ended up profiting from this maneuver in the end? Other large hedge funds. The Redditors did not beat hedge funds at all. It was hedge funds beating other hedge funds, which is what those guys do all day. As their jobs. So whatever.
Suffice to say, the story is way too complicated to fit into any neat narrative. Right. It happened. It exists. It's definitely a surprising, interesting, and kind of like game systems thinking kind of example of something that's happening in the real world, and we'll probably see more things like it. In fact, there's another one just like it, which is the other big story the other big tech story that happened recently, which is NFTs. So I think this is
another speculative market, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So this is another very similar example in which an online community, which is sort of a game adjacent, right? Which is people making tech art, making digital art, connected with a new kind of technology. So using the blockchain and using crypto to create a new way of a new kind of market for digital artworks, right? Called NFTs, non-fungible tokens.
Right, except not really for digital artworks, but literally for a pointer to a digital artwork. And one particular marketplace is like, the artist selling you a certificate saying, look, I agree that you own this special edition of my artwork. That's the closest analogy to what's going on here. What's interesting is that so many people didn't quite seem to get that. Even people who are involved in NFTs were like, wait a second, I thought that the actual information that comprised this digital media was encoded in the NFT. And they're like, no, it's not. There's a URL in there. Yeah.
It's so confusing. One would be forgiven for thinking that it was designed to be confusing. And in a way, it kind of is, right? That's how the blockchain works in a way. Yeah. And it is, and again, there's many different ways of framing this narratively, right? You can frame it as an alternative to the existing institutional structure of the kind of art world as speculative.
Although Christie's is involved, so it's sort of an alternative.
Or is it just an extension of everything that's bad about the existing art market? And of course, I think the biggest headline here is the negative externality of the ecological impact that current blockchain technology has. So I think everyone is aware of the fact that that's sort of the primary concern, above and beyond whether you think it's a good idea for people to get $70 million for a JPEG of Hillary Clinton smoking a bong.
Right. It's like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this on the blockchain where it has these externalities, right?
But I think it's possible that this could drive people to come up with alternatives to proof of work. I mean, I think that's what we should hope for.
That would be nice.
As opposed to hoping that it just goes away entirely. It doesn't look like it's going to go away entirely, but we should really be making an effort to shift from these very ecologically expensive ways of doing the blockchain to something that's more sustainable.
I saw a serious argument on Twitter of somebody saying, well, actually, it's important to stick with proof of work for right now because it's driving the energy industry to provide like more efficient, lower cost energy. Right, which is like, I go around with my axe chopping down your door so that the security company will provide you with a better door, right? Yeah. It would be a shame if anything happened to your door.
There is some truth to this in the sense that solutions just lead to problems, and problems lead to solutions, and then solutions lead to more problems. Like all we're ever doing as a civilizational project is trying to level up our problems. We are already surrounded by problems. What we try to do is swap out the problems we have now for slightly less bad problems. So
sure, right. But what's the best way to get there? Is it just by burning things down until somebody comes up with a anti-burning technology?
We need some way to put out fire. We'll
or if we only knew some way to stop lighting things on fire, we just figure that out. Like pointlessly lighting stuff on fire. How are we going to stop that?
Speaking of things being lit on fire, our last set of articles is our Kickstarter related. First of all, just a quick shout out from Jeff Petrello about a Native American Kickstarter called Coyote and Crow, developed by a team and set in an alternate future where the Americas were never colonized. So that
very interesting form of
kind of a nice anti-colonialist game, which kind of explores some themes that we're interested in and have been talking about. And then after that, there was another Kickstarter that kind of went sour, which was this Warframe-inspired tabletop role-playing game. It just seemed
whole conversation here.
This was a one where somebody who loved to take existing IP and turn it into fun tabletop games was looking at Warframe, which is this loot and shoot game, and trying to make a tabletop RPG based on that universe, and then somehow managed to kind of like become the target of a lot of abuse from people within the Warframe community.
Right, the fans of Warframe were like, how dare you rip off our favorite game? When the developers themselves are kind of known for encouraging fan works, right? And would have been fine with it. So it's this weird kind of way for fans to like enlist themselves in an army that nobody wants to like defend intellectual property rights.
It just seemed like everybody involved was confused, about this, including the person who wrote this article, quite honestly. It's very confusing, like which where is the law when it comes to fan-based work, and everyone involved is an idiot pretend lawyer, and
it's a derivative work that's clearly inspired by it. When it comes down to it, probably if the Warframe developers sued this guy, that they would find in their favor, and his game would be shut down. The point is that they probably wouldn't have sued him.
There are these gray areas within which fan culture takes place. But it's like, that's a subtlety that these Warframe superfan idiots weren't kind of capable of.
Why can't they could not let that gray space exist, which is really too bad for everybody involved in it. And the game, it doesn't get made.
But I will have to say that also, if you're a creator working in this space, it's kind of on you to navigate that, right? And in a way, I think you need to be prepared for how you're going to communicate what you're doing. And it is a minefield. And so kind of like, I got to say that this is something that if anyone listening to us is involved in similar kinds of fan-based projects, you have to think about how you're going to manage this ahead of time.
Right, and take some responsibility.
About Kickstarter that we should mention was the Luke Crane project that kind of just went off the rails. Luke Crane, one of our adjunct faculty, a longtime member of our community, friend of the Game Center, really screwed the pooch on a Kickstarter project that he was doing that involved a big collaboration with a bunch of tabletop role-playing designers, including a bunch of people, Game Center alums and members of our community. But he included as a collaborator someone who was super problematic and had a big, terrible event that had happened a few months ago. Luke just kind of thoughtlessly included this person, and everyone was quite upset about it, and legitimately so. Where is this now, Naomi, from your perspective?
I think I feel like Luke has yet to put a public statement out about it, from what I understand. Although I haven't spoken to him personally, that he's working on some kind of statement about what happened during this Kickstarter. Yeah.
I think I hope that that's forthcoming. Luke, when we spoke, shared his plan to make a public apology and a public explanation. I think privately has been communicating with everyone involved in the project, and I believe that if he hasn't made this public statement, it is forthcoming, and I hope that he's able to learn the lessons he needs to learn and make everyone feel comfortable going forward, because it was a real mess.
Yeah, definitely. And and very upsetting for, folks from the Game Center who are involved.
Yeah, but I believe that Luke is doing the work to make it right, and I hope that that happens, because I think everyone involved wants that to be the outcome.
Yeah.
So, what else, Naomi? Did we?
I think
lightning fast.
I think we got through an incredible amount, and we're going to wrap up right on the hour at 1:00. And so big thanks to Logan and to Mirabai for backing us up as always.
And a big thanks to you, Naomi, and a big thanks to chat. Thanks for coming back. We missed you. Welcome back, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for tuning into The Discourse. Once again, your news hosts have been Naomi Clark and Frank Lance. I was your behind-the-scenes operator, Logan Clare. Graphics are by Winnie Song, and captioning was by Mirabai Knight of Steno Knight Karch Services. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.